The world just tilted. Again, and right now millions of men are glued to their screens, hearts elevated, minds flooded with noise, waiting for someone to tell them how afraid to be. That is the pawn's posture, reactive, dependent, swept. The moment the world gets dangerous is the exact moment most people stop thinking and start following. Following the loudest voice, the most alarming headline, the mob's emotional current. And that is precisely when the strategist separates himself, not by being numb, not by pretending nothing is happening, but by doing what almost no one around him is doing, reading the game clearly, governing his inner state, and making deliberate moves while others are paralyzed by the spectacle. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire at war, not from a palace at a safe distance, from a military camp on the Danube frontier surrounded by plague and barbarian pressure on multiple flanks simultaneously. He wrote the Meditations not as philosophy and tranquility, but as daily mental discipline under active geopolitical chaos. And what did he write? He did not write about how to predict what would happen next. He wrote about how to govern the only territory that was unconditionally his own mind. That distinction is everything, because the chaos outside was real. The stakes were real. But the man who could not govern himself first could govern nothing else. Not an army, not a province, not a single strategic decision made under pressure. Here is the first truth about geopolitical escalation that no news channel will ever tell you. It is designed to consume your attention, not your resources, not your physical safety in most cases, your attention. Because your attention, captured and held in a state of low-grade alarm, is the most valuable commodity on the planet right now. Media organizations, political actors, algorithmic platforms, and all of them profit from your sustained emotional arousal. The escalation becomes a funnel, and you, staring into it, heart rate elevated, doom scrolling through takes and counter-takes, are pouring your cognitive energy, your actual strategic capacity, directly into a machine that converts it into someone else's revenue and someone else's power. Machiavelli wrote that men are governed more by appearances than by reality. He did not mean this as a cynical observation about human stupidity. He meant it as a strategic fact that every serious player must understand and build into their model of the world. The appearance of overwhelming danger, broadcast on every screen, amplified by every algorithm, is not the same as the actual structure of danger as it applies to your life. Most men never make this distinction. They absorb the appearance and respond to it as if it were the reality directly bearing down on them personally. This is how the pawn operates, reacting to the presentation of the board rather than reading the board itself. Reading the board requires a specific kind of discipline, not the discipline of ignoring the world. That is not strategy, that is willful blindness. The discipline of the strategist is this. First, he filters signal from noise. He understands that the loudest information is almost never the most important information. In any geopolitical escalation, the signal, the actual structural shifts in power, the real economic pressure points, the genuine decisions that will ripple outward, is buried under 40 layers of emotional framing designed to produce a reaction, not clarity. The strategist's first move is to find the signal. Strip the emotional charge. Look at what is actually moving, what is actually shifting, and what the second and third order consequences are likely to be. Second, he asks the Stoic question that cuts through every panic. What here is within my control and what is not? This is not a question of passivity. It is the most aggressive strategic question you can ask. Because the man who cannot answer it clearly will spend his energy on the uncontrollable, on trying to predict what three governments will decide, on trying to feel out whether an escalation becomes a wider conflict, on monitoring headlines for reassurance that will never fully come. The man who answers it honestly redirects every joule of his energy toward what he can actually move. His preparation, his positioning, his capacity to act effectively regardless of what the external environment does next. Here is the strategic framework. Call it the 3 separations. First separation. Separate the signal from the spectacle. Set a specific time-bounded window each day, 20 minutes maximum, to consume geopolitical information from sources that report facts without emotional amplification. Outside that window, the noise is off. This is not avoidance, this is information hygiene. The strategist does not swim in the river of news all day. He takes a measured drink at a specific time and then goes back to building. Second separation. Separate what is geopolitically real from what is personally actionable. When an escalation occurs, sit down with a clear mind and a piece of paper and ask, what are the realistic second-order consequences of this development that could actually affect my life, my finances, my work, my relationships, my supply chains? Be ruthlessly specific, not vague fear, specific consequence mapping. You will almost always find that the realistic personal impact is far smaller and more manageable than the ambient terror level suggests. And the few things you do identify as real exposures, now you have an actual problem to solve, which is infinitely better than a formless dread you cannot act on. Third separation. Separate your identity from your reaction. This is the Stoic core. You are not your fear response. You are not your anxiety about what might happen. Those are weather patterns moving through you. Real, but not you. The strategist watches his own reactions with the same clear-eyed realism he applies to the external world. He notices the elevated heart rate, the pull toward the screen, the desire for certainty. He does not shame himself for these reactions. They are human and honest. He simply does not let them make decisions. The reaction is information. The decision belongs to the governed mind. Sun Tzu said, "The victorious warrior wins first and then goes to war. The defeated warrior goes to war first and then seeks to win." Most men in a moment of geopolitical escalation go to war with the chaos immediately. They react, argue, spiral, doomscroll, catastrophize, and then, exhausted and confused, try to think their way to clarity. The sequence is inverted. The strategist wins first, inside, before he makes a single external move. He governs his attention. He filters the signal. He maps the real consequences. He identifies what he can move. And then, only then, he acts. This is the Machiavellian play that the majority will never make. Using the moment of collective panic to consolidate your own position. While others are paralyzed, you are preparing. While the crowd is arguing about who is to blame, you are asking what moves are now available that were not available before. Disruption is not only a threat, it is a reordering of the board, and every time the board is reordered, some pieces that were blocked become free to move. The strategist sees this. The pawn does not. In concrete terms, moments of geopolitical uncertainty tend to reveal exactly which parts of your life lack resilience. Supply chains that depended on a single point, income streams with no redundancy, skills that are location or context dependent, social and professional networks that are narrower than you knew. The escalation becomes a diagnostic, not a punishment, a diagnostic. Every weakness it illuminates is a building task that was always there, waiting, hidden by comfortable times. The strategist thanks the pressure for the clarity and gets to work. Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of campaigns that would determine whether Rome held its frontiers, continued to practice philosophy every morning. Not because philosophy was more important than the war, because the quality of every decision he made in the war depended on the quality of the mind making it. He understood what most leaders throughout history have failed to understand. The inner work is not separate from the outer work. It is the foundation of it. The governed mind is not a luxury for peaceful times. It is the strategic asset that makes effective action possible precisely when the times are not peaceful. You are the architect of your own sovereignty. The world will not become more stable so that you can practice discipline. You practice discipline so that you can function and advance and build, regardless of what the world does. The geopolitical noise will not quiet down so that you can think clearly. You develop the capacity to think clearly inside the noise. That capacity built through daily practice of the three separations. Signal from spectacle, geopolitical reality from personal actionability, your identity from your reaction. That is the fortress that no external escalation can breach. The pawn waits for safety before he moves. The sovereign knows that safety is not given. It is built from the inside, one governed decision at a time. The board has shifted. The question is not whether you are afraid. The question is whether you are thinking. Because thinking clearly when everyone else is reacting, that is the move. That is always the move. If this framework is the kind of thinking you want to build into your foundation, STOLVEX is where that work happens. Subscribe and join the newsletter at stolvex.kit.com. It is a direct line into the strategic and stoic principles that build the governed mind. The world is going to keep tilting. Make sure you are the one still standing when it does.